They believed humanity would beg. They believed Earth would kneel. They believed wrong. The year was 2347, and humanity no longer belonged to a single world. Earth was still the cradle, but it was no longer the home of all humans. 12 settled planets carried human cities beneath alien skies. Mining colonies clung to asteroids. Orbital habitats drifted silently between stars. Together, they were governed by the United Earth Coalition, a fragile but determined alliance that had learned, through centuries of hardship, how to survive division. What humanity had not learned yet was how to face extinction. Admiral Daniel Hayes had served the Coalition Navy for 3 decades. He had commanded fleets during colonial conflicts, suppressed pirate uprisings, and negotiated ceasefires that saved millions of lives. He thought he had seen everything war could offer. He was wrong. The moment came on an ordinary Tuesday aboard the UEC Resolute, a flagship patrolling the outer boundary of human-controlled space. Hayes was reviewing routine reports when the communications officer suddenly froze at her console. "Admiral, you need to see this." Her voice was tight, controlled, too controlled. Strange signals flooded the main display, patterns that didn't match any known human technology. The origin point hovered just beyond the frontier, in a region of space no human vessel had ever charted. "They're not ours," the officer said quietly. Hayes already knew. The signals shifted, reorganized, then resolved into something far worse. A message. It wasn't spoken. It wasn't transmitted in one language. It arrived in dozens: English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, translated with terrifying precision. Submit or be erased. The sender identified itself as the Valoran Dominion. According to the message, they had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. According to the message, they had conquered over 10,000 intelligent species. According to the message, humanity was irrelevant, an infestation that had grown unnoticed on the edge of their territory. President Marcus Webb received the transmission less than an hour later. He was a composed man, known for his restraint and measured decisions. But as he read the words scrolling across his tablet, his jaw tightened, and his hands trembled with restrained fury. An emergency summit was convened within hours. Governors from every colony, military commanders, scientific directors, and diplomatic leaders gathered in New Geneva, the coalition's capital beneath the moon's great dome. "They are not asking," Webb said, breaking the silence. "They are informing us." The terms were clear. Human worlds would become Dominion property. Human labor would be reassigned. Human children would be educated to serve an alien empire. No negotiation. No alliance. No mercy. The room understood the implication instantly. This was not a conflict over territory. This was a demand for surrender. Ambassador Nicole Carter was selected to respond. She was small in stature, sharp-eyed, and known across the coalition as someone who could walk into hostile rooms and leave with peace in her hands. She had ended wars before they began. This time, she suspected words would not be enough. Her diplomatic vessel traveled alone to the coordinates provided by the Dominion. What awaited her dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. The alien ship was vast beyond comprehension, its surface layered with weapon arrays that pulsed with unfamiliar energy. It did not move like a machine. It loomed, as if space itself bent around it. Inside, she met High Overseer Kethrall. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, his scaled body shifting color as he moved. His eyes were a harsh, predatory yellow, and they regarded Nicole with open disdain. "Your species will comply," Kethrall stated flatly. "Your worlds will be absorbed. Your people reassigned. Resistance will be erased." Nicole listened. She showed no fear. When he finished, she rose to her full height and met his gaze. "I will take your terms back to my government," she said calmly. "We will respond." The overseer laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. "There is only one outcome," he said. "But do take your time. It will make your extinction more amusing." Nicole returned to Earth with the truth. That night, President Webb, Admiral Hayes, and Nicole Carter met privately. We cannot win a conventional war, Hayes admitted. Their technology eclipses ours. Their fleet size is beyond anything we can match. Webb looked at him. Then what are you saying? Hayes exhaled slowly. I'm saying humans don't survive by fighting fair. We survive by being stubborn, by refusing to accept defeat, by making victory so painful that our enemies regret ever challenging us. Nicole nodded. They don't understand defiance, she said. They've ruled too long. The decision was made. President Webb addressed humanity the following day. His message reached every planet, station, and ship flying the coalition flag. We were offered chains, he said. We choose freedom, whatever the cost. The response was immediate. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Civilian factories converted overnight to weapons production. Scientists abandoned theoretical research to focus on survival. And Nicole Carter returned to the Valoran ship one final time. High Overseer Kethrall greeted her with a satisfied expression. I bring humanity's answer, she said. She stepped forward, her voice steady. This is your only warning. Leave our space. Never return. Never cross our worlds again. If you do, you will face consequences your empire has never known. The Overseer's scales darkened with rage. You dare threaten the Dominion? We don't threaten, Nicole replied. We promise. She turned and walked away. Behind her, the largest empire the galaxy had ever known prepared for war. 3 months passed after humanity delivered its warning to the Valoran Dominion. 3 months of silence. No messages. No threats. No response at all. To some, the quiet felt like hope. To Admiral Daniel Hayes, it felt like the pause before an avalanche. He used every second. Across human space, shipyards burned with activity. Massive construction frames surrounded Mars, Luna, and the industrial moons of Jupiter. Crews worked in rotating shifts that never stopped. Old cargo haulers were stripped and refitted with weapon mounts. Research vessels were converted into electronic warfare platforms. Anything that could fly, anything that could fire, was pressed into service. Humanity was not building an elegant fleet. They were building a desperate one. Hayes slept in his command chair more nights than not, reviewing projections that never looked good. Even at maximum output, the coalition could field barely 3,000 combat-capable ships. Intelligence estimates suggested the Dominion could deploy 10 times that number without strain. Still, Hayes kept pushing. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Morgan was pushing just as hard. She stood in the training hangar of the carrier Vanguard, facing 12 pilots who would form her strike squadron. They were young, too young. Volunteers from mining colonies, orbital farms, research stations. People who had never expected to fight an interstellar war. Their ships are bigger, Ashley said plainly. Their weapons hit harder. Their shields can absorb punishment that would destroy us. No one spoke. But, she continued, they don't know how we fight. They expect lines and formations. They expect fear. We're going to give them confusion. She activated the holo projector. Alien ship schematics rotated in the air. We get close. We stay fast. We hit weak points and disappear. You do not try to be heroes. You survive long enough to strike again. A pilot near the back raised his hand. Commander, what if speed isn't enough? Ashley met his eyes. Then we make it cost them anyway. While pilots trained, scientists worked underground. Dr. Nathan Gray hadn't seen the sky in weeks. His lab beneath the lunar surface buzzed with power conduits and alien components. A Valoran reconnaissance probe, damaged but intact, had been recovered near the border and quietly transported to his team. What they discovered changed everything. Their shields aren't magic, Gray explained during a secure briefing with President Webb. They're frequency-based, complex, adaptive, but predictable. Webb leaned forward. You're saying they can fail? Yes, Gray replied. If we disrupt the frequency at close range, their shields collapse. How close? Admiral Hayes asked. Gray hesitated. Dangerously close. That was enough. Production orders went out immediately. Prototype shield disruptors were rushed into mass manufacturing. Human ships would need to fly straight into the teeth of enemy fire. But for the first time, the Dominion would be vulnerable. On Earth itself, General Ryan Scott prepared for the worst. Planetary defense grids were expanded beneath cities, oceans, and mountain ranges. Civilian infrastructure was hardened. Evacuation plans were drilled relentlessly. Earth would not be an easy prize. If they reach the surface, Scott told his officers, they'll find a planet that fights back. Everywhere ordinary people adapted. Farmers learned marksmanship. Engineers turned mining lasers into weapons. Teachers trained children in evacuation protocols instead of history lessons. No one pretended life would return to normal. Everyone knew something vast was coming. The silence broke on a cold December morning. Long-range sensors screamed warnings across every defense network. Hyperspace signatures bloomed at the edge of detection, far too many to count at first. Admiral Hayes was on the bridge of the Resolute when the numbers stabilized. "Sir," the sensor officer whispered, pale-faced, 15,000 contacts. Hayes said nothing. He simply stared at the display as the stars themselves vanished behind an advancing wall of metal. The Valoran fleet emerged in flawless formation. Ships so massive they dwarfed human cruisers. Energy rippled along their hulls like living fire. At their center, a presence darker than the rest. Supreme Commander Vaylor watched humanity's defenses with cold amusement. He had exterminated civilizations older and stronger than this one. These humans had spirit, yes, but spirit did not stop annihilation. Across every human screen, Emperor Drain appeared. Ancient, regal, furious. "You were given mercy," Drain declared. "You rejected it. Now you will be erased. Your worlds will burn. Your kind will be forgotten." The transmission ended. Hayes turned to his communications officer. "Open fleet-wide channel." He stood tall, exhaustion forgotten. "This is Admiral Hayes. Today, we face an enemy that believes itself eternal. They think we are temporary." Human ships powered weapons. Pilots sealed cockpits. Engineers whispered goodbyes they hoped would never be final. "They are wrong," Hayes continued. "We survived our planet. We survived ourselves. We will survive this." Ashley Morgan closed her cockpit hatch. She glanced at the photo taped beside her controls. Her family on a distant colony world. "I'm coming back," she whispered. The Valoran fleet advanced. Supreme Commander Vaylor gave the order without hesitation. Attack. Space ignited. The war for humanity's existence had begun. Space became fire. The first exchange tore open the darkness like a wound. Valoran warships advanced in disciplined ranks, their weapons releasing torrents of energy that burned through vacuum with terrifying precision. Human vessels scattered immediately, breaking formation as planned, diving into debris fields and asteroid clusters that cluttered the system's edge. Admiral Daniel Hayes watched the battle unfold across layered tactical displays. Red markers, enemy contacts, outnumbered blue by an absurd margin. Even knowing this moment was coming, the scale of it still tightened his chest. "All wings," he commanded, voice steady. "Initiate pattern Delta. Do not engage head-on. Force them to chase." The Valoran fleet expected resistance. What they did not expect was disorder. Human ships didn't form neat lines or defensive walls. They moved in unpredictable swarms, vanishing behind asteroids, reappearing at odd angles, striking and fleeing before return fire could lock on. Hidden platforms disguised as abandoned mining rigs activated, launching volleys into the advancing Dominion formation. The first Valoran cruiser exploded less than 2 minutes into the engagement. Supreme Commander Vaylor noticed. 3 more followed in rapid succession. "Adjust targeting parameters," he ordered calmly. "Increase forward pressure." He was irritated, but not concerned. Losses were acceptable. Humans were clever, but cleverness would break beneath overwhelming force. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Morgan felt the battle in her bones. Her fighter screamed as she threaded through tumbling debris, enemy fire slicing past close enough to rattle her hull. "Squadron 7, with me," she barked. "Target sensor clusters. Blind them." 12 fighters surged forward, skimming dangerously close to a Valoran destroyer. Ashley fired at point-blank range, her shots punching into exposed sensor arrays. The massive ship drifted, suddenly deaf and blind, colliding with one of its own escorts in a catastrophic explosion. Cheers crackled over comms, cut short as two human fighters vanished in white flashes. "Stay focused," Ashley snapped. "Keep moving." Elsewhere, Captain Kevin Torres gathered his heavy cruisers into a tight wedge. His ships were slower, built for punishment rather than agility, and they were taking hits already. But they carried something new. "Hold course," Torres said as alarms blared across his bridge. "Wait for my mark." Valoran fire battered their shields. One cruiser disintegrated entirely. Another spun out of control, venting atmosphere. Then Torres saw the opening. "Activate disruptors," he ordered. Pulses of precisely tuned energy rippled outward. Across the Dominion line, shields flickered, then failed. For the first time in 12,000 years, Valoran ships stood naked in battle. "All batteries," Torres roared. "Fire." Human weapons slammed home. Armor cracked. Hulls ruptured. Explosions blossomed like dying stars. Dozens of alien vessels were torn apart in seconds. On the Valoran flagship, disbelief rippled through command decks. "How are their weapons penetrating?" an officer demanded. "They are interfering with shield harmonics," another replied, scales paling. "This should not be possible." Vaylor's jaw tightened. "Regroup. Protect the core formation." But Admiral Hayes had been waiting for that command. "Second Fleet," he said quietly. "Engage." Human reserve ships erupted from hiding near Europa, striking the retreating Dominion flank with brutal force. For a moment, just a moment, the tide shifted. The battle raged for hours. Human losses mounted. Entire squadrons disappeared. Ships burned until nothing remained but drifting fragments and fading signals. And still, the Valoran numbers pressed forward. Then Hayes saw it. A massive carrier detached from the enemy formation, pushing steadily toward Earth. Its escorts formed an impenetrable shell. Hayes felt cold understanding settle in his gut. "They're deploying a planet killer," he said. "The extinction weapon. A device used only when conquest was no longer worth the effort." "All ships," Hayes ordered, "intercept that carrier. It cannot reach Earth." Human vessels surged forward into a storm of fire. They died in waves. Ashley pushed her fighter beyond safety limits, engines screaming. Around her, pilots she trained with vanished one by one. "Come on," she whispered. "Just a little closer." It wasn't enough. The carrier advanced relentlessly. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral Hayes," Captain Gregory Cole said calmly, "requesting authorization for ramming speed." Hayes closed his eyes. He knew what that meant. "Permission granted," he replied softly. "Go with honor." The Defiant accelerated. It was not alone. 16 human ships followed, pushing engines past redline, ignoring incoming fire that tore them apart. One by one, they vanished, but not before closing the distance. The Defiant struck the carrier dead center. Reactors detonated. The explosion lit Earth's night sky like a second sun. When the light faded, the carrier was gone. The extinction weapon died with it. Silence rippled across the battlefield. Then chaos. Valoran formations faltered. Orders conflicted. Retreat signals clashed with attack commands. Supreme Commander Vaylor stared at the wreckage, disbelief burning into rage. "Fall back," came Emperor Drain's voice at last. "Regroup. This is not over." The surviving Dominion ships withdrew. Human forces did not pursue. They couldn't. Admiral Hayes looked out at the debris field. Thousands dead, heroes lost, victory paid for in blood. "We held," he said quietly. But everyone knew the truth. The Dominion would return. And next time, they would bring everything. The shock waves of the Battle of the Threshold traveled farther than any weapon ever fired. The Valoran Dominion tried to bury the truth. They jammed transmissions, destroyed relay stations, executed messengers. It didn't matter. Too many had seen it. Too many had felt the tremor of something impossible. The Dominion had bled. across occupied space. Whispers turned into signals. Signals into plans. On Kether Prime, deep beneath a rusted factory that once produced Valoran armor, Elder Sithrak listened to a stolen broadcast replay for the 5th time. The image was distorted, the audio fractured, but the meaning was unmistakable. Human ships destroying Valoran war vessels. Valoran ships retreating. For 800 years, the Kathrani people had lived under Dominion rule. Their children were conscripted, their labor stolen, their culture slowly erased. Rebellion had always meant extinction. Until now. They can be hurt, Sithrak rasped, his faded scales tightening with emotion. The Dominion can be hurt. Around him, resistance leaders exchanged looks filled with something unfamiliar. Hope. Similar scenes unfolded across the Empire. On Waterworld labor camps, Orvani workers sabotaged filtration systems and mining rigs. On broken moons, refugee Turans activated hidden beacons they had guarded for generations. Messages passed quietly, encoded in trade routes and maintenance logs. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had made the galaxy remember what defiance looked like. President Marcus Webb understood the moment instantly. "We can't fight this war alone," he told the council. "But maybe we don't have to." He summoned Ambassador Nicole Carter. Her next mission would be far more dangerous than delivering a warning. She would carry a promise. Nicole's ship slipped beyond human space under stealth protocols designed to avoid Dominion detection. Captain Derek Palmer commanded the vessel, quiet, sharp-eyed, a man shaped by loss. His family had died when Valoran raiders destroyed a civilian convoy years earlier. Since then, he had volunteered for every mission that took him closer to their empire. Their first destination was Kether Prime. They landed in darkness, guided by resistance signals that flickered briefly before vanishing. Beneath the factory ruins, Nicole met Elder Sithrak face to face. "You are the human," he said, studying her closely. "The one who spoke to the overseer." "I am," Nicole replied. "And I'm here to ask you to fight." A low, bitter sound escaped the elder. "We have fought before. We lost everything." Nicole met his gaze. "So did we. But we're still standing." She spoke of alliances, of shared technology, of a future without chains. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Sithrak extended his clawed hand. "We will rise with you." Word spread. World by world, cell by cell, Nicole built something no empire had ever allowed to exist, a coalition of the oppressed. Not all answered the call. Some were too afraid, others too broken. But enough said yes. Back in human space, the war evolved. Dr. Nathan Gray delivered another breakthrough that made Admiral Hayes stare in disbelief. "We've cracked their hyperspace architecture," Gray said. "Not only that, we improved it. Human ships were no longer slower. They were faster." Raids began almost immediately. Ashley Morgan, promoted and given command of a strike group, led lightning attacks deep into Dominion territory. Supply depots vanished. Communication hubs went dark. Prison transports were intercepted and freed. Human ships appeared, struck, and vanished before Valoran fleets could respond. The Dominion was forced to spread thin, trying to defend everything, controlling nothing. On the Valoran homeworld, Emperor Drain watched reports pile up. Shipyards destroyed. Governors executed by their own subjects. Entire sectors destabilized. "This should not be happening," one advisor whispered. Drain's eyes burned. "They are insects," he snarled. "Insects that bite." Then he made his decision. "I will end this myself." Orders rippled outward. Every fleet, every legion, every weapon. The largest armada in galactic history began to assemble, 50,000 warships drawn from every conquered world, carrying enough firepower to erase star systems. Human intelligence detected the buildup within days. "They're bringing everything," General Ryan Scott said grimly. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly, "which means they're leaving everything else exposed." The plan was desperate. Humanity would stand as the anvil, absorbing the full force of the Dominion's fury. The coalition would become the hammer. President Webb authorized it without hesitation. Send the signal, he said. Tell our allies the window is opening. Nicole Carter stood at the viewport of her ship as messages flew across the stars. Encoded acknowledgments, readiness confirmations, quiet vows of vengeance. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Valoran Dominion was about to fight a war on every front. And at the center of it all stood Earth, waiting, unbowed. The Valoran Armada arrived like a moving eclipse. 50,000 warships tore out of hyperspace in flawless alignment, blotting out distant stars as if the universe itself was retreating. Energy rippled across hulls the size of cities. Weapon arrays powered up in synchronized waves. It was not merely a fleet. It was a declaration that resistance would end today. At its center drifted the Eternal Dominion. Emperor Drain stood on its command dais, ancient and unyielding, surrounded by symbols of 1,000 conquered civilizations. His empire had ruled through inevitability, through the certainty that defiance led only to extinction. He intended to restore that certainty with Earth's ashes. Around the blue planet, humanity waited. Admiral Daniel Hayes layered his defenses with brutal efficiency. 3,000 ships, every one armed, every one manned by crews who understood they might not survive the hour. We don't stop them, Hayes told his commanders calmly. We slow them, we bleed them, and we hold. Captain Ashley Morgan addressed her pilots one last time before launch. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she secured her helmet. They outnumber us, she said. They always have. But today, we're not fighting for victory. We're fighting for time. Every minute we hold them here is another world freed out there. Across Dominion space, that freedom ignited. Kathrani resistance forces stormed shipyards once thought unassailable, turning Valoran weapons on their former masters. Orvani saboteurs detonated fuel depots, plunging entire sectors into darkness. Turan strike teams hijacked prison transports, swelling the ranks of rebellion with every jump. The Empire cracked everywhere at once. But at Earth, the storm broke. Drain raised a clawed hand. Advance. The Armada surged forward. Space became hell. Valoran fire obliterated human vessels in the opening moments. Ships vanished in silent explosions. Defense lines collapsed and reformed again and again under relentless pressure. Ashley Morgan's fighters dove into the chaos, slicing through gaps no larger ship could navigate. They crippled sensors, severed weapon arrays, blinded giants before disappearing into debris clouds. Her wing lost 4 pilots in the first 10 minutes. She didn't slow down. Commander Kevin Torres led heavy cruisers in rapid hyperspace strikes, appearing behind enemy formations, unloading devastating volleys, then vanishing before counterfire could lock. Keep them turning, Torres barked. Never let them focus. On Earth, General Ryan Scott activated planetary defense protocols. Cities powered down. Orbital weapons rose from hidden platforms. The planet became a fortress wrapped in silence. For 3 days, the battle raged without pause. Human losses were catastrophic. The Resolute took critical damage, its hull breached in multiple sections. Admiral Hayes transferred command to a smaller vessel without hesitation, continuing to direct the fight as casualties reports flooded in. Then the reports that mattered arrived. Kethra Prime liberated. Sector 9, fuel supply destroyed. Multiple governors captured. The Dominion was unraveling. Drain received the updates with growing fury. Advisors urged withdrawal. The Empire was burning. Continuing the assault made no strategic sense. Drain ignored them. Earth dies, he said coldly. Everything else can burn. He ordered the final charge. Thousands of warships accelerated toward the planet in a dense spearhead, weapons blazing, shields reinforced to maximum output. It was meant to overwhelm by sheer mass. Admiral Hayes saw it instantly. All ships, he said quietly. Intercept. No matter the cost. What followed was not strategy. It was sacrifice. Human vessels hurled themselves into the advancing wall, ramming, detonating reactors, blocking trajectories with their own hulls. Pilots flew crippled ships into enemy bridges. engineers stayed aboard long enough to overload cores that wiped out entire formations. Ashley Morgan's fighter took a direct hit. Alarm screamed as her engines died. She drifted helplessly amid wreckage and fire, watching the battle continue without her. "Hold them," she whispered. "Just a little longer." The Eternal Dominion pushed through. Victory was seconds away. Then Captain Kevin Torres did the impossible. His remaining cruisers, burning, barely functional, formed up one last time. "It's been an honor," Torres said calmly over open comms. "All hands, thank you." They charged. The impact tore the Eternal Dominion apart. Explosions ripped through its core. Fire consumed command decks. The flagship split open, breaking into flaming sections visible from Earth's surface. Emperor Drain died with his empire screaming around him. The armada faltered, leaderless, confused. Then it broke. Valoran ships turned and fled in every direction, abandoning the battlefield, abandoning Earth. Silence fell. Humanity still stood, barely, but standing. The war did not end with a single explosion. It unraveled. In the hours following the destruction of the Eternal Dominion, confusion spread through the remaining Valoran fleets like a disease. Orders contradicted each other. Command hierarchies collapsed. Ships jumped to hyperspace without coordinates, vanishing into deep space or tearing themselves apart mid-transition. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Valoran Dominion had no emperor. And without him, the empire was nothing but fear held together by habit. Across the galaxy, the oppressed sensed it immediately. Kathrani worlds declared independence within days, broadcasting executions of Valoran governors as warnings that the old order was finished. Orvani control councils seized orbital stations and cut off supply routes permanently. Species that had lived as refugees for centuries reclaimed their home systems, raising new flags over skies they had never believed they would see again. The Dominion did not fall in a single moment. It collapsed everywhere at once. On Earth, celebrations did not come quickly. Hospitals overflowed. Rescue crews searched drifting wreckage fields for survivors who would never answer. Memorial walls grew longer by the hour as names were confirmed and added. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood alone in a quiet observation deck overlooking Earth. The blue curve of the planet glowed softly beneath him, untouched. Saved. At an unthinkable cost. President Marcus Webb joined him without ceremony. "We won," Webb said quietly. Hayes didn't turn. "We survived." "That was never guaranteed." "No," Hayes agreed. "It never is." Ashley Morgan regained consciousness 2 days later in a medical bay orbiting Earth. Her fighter had been recovered, what remained of it, along with her body pulled from the wreckage by an automated rescue drone. She learned the truth slowly. Her squadron was gone. Every pilot she had trained, flown with, joked with, dead. She said nothing when the doctor told her. She simply stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the station, wondering how silence could hurt more than explosions. Nicole Carter returned to Earth weeks later. She had been present on 3 liberated worlds when the news of Drain's death spread. She had watched alien crowds, beings of shapes humanity had never imagined, cry, scream, collapse in disbelief as chains they had worn for generations finally shattered. Hope was loud. Grief was quieter. President Webb addressed the galaxy once more, this time not from a bunker or command center, but from the steps of New Geneva beneath open sky. "We did not start this war," he said. "We did not want it. We wanted peace, exploration, and a future for our children." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But when tyranny crossed our border, we chose to stand. And when we stood, others stood with us." Across 100 worlds, screens carried his image. "The age of empires built on fear is over," Webb continued. "What comes next is up to all of us. From the ashes of the Dominion, something new formed. The Galactic Assembly. It was not an empire. It had no emperor, no overlord species. Each world, human and alien alike, held a voice. Decisions were slow, arguments endless. But for the first time in known history, power flowed upward instead of down. Nicole Carter became humanity's first permanent ambassador. She spent years traveling between stars, helping former enemies learn how to speak instead of strike. Some meetings ended in shouting. Others ended in fragile agreements. All of them mattered. Ashley Morgan returned to flight status months later. She took command of the rebuilt defense fleet, training pilots who had grown up watching the war unfold from shelters and evacuation ships. She taught them speed, unpredictability, and restraint. Power doesn't make you right, she told them. It just makes you dangerous. Never confuse the two. Admiral Hayes retired quietly. No speeches. No ceremonies. He moved to a small coastal town on Earth, where the ocean rolled endlessly against stone. He spent his days walking the shoreline, remembering faces, hearing voices that only existed in memory now. At night, he looked at the stars and wondered how close extinction had truly come. Years passed. The galaxy healed. Trade routes replaced invasion corridors. Joint exploration missions mapped regions once forbidden by Dominion decree. Former slave worlds rebuilt cultures long suppressed. Languages spoken openly for the first time in centuries. On the moon, a monument was raised. It showed hands of every shape, human fingers, alien claws, tentacles, talons, reaching upward together. The inscription was simple. They were warned. 50 years later, a young man stood before that monument. His name was Brandon Cole. He traced a finger over a name carved into the stone. Captain Gregory Cole, UEC Defiant. An elderly woman approached him, walking slowly but with purpose. "I knew your grandfather," she said softly. Brandon turned, surprised. "You did?" "I was there," she continued. "When he volunteered. When he chose to run toward death so others could live." Brandon swallowed. Was he afraid? The woman smiled faintly. Yes, but he went anyway. They stood in silence as ships crossed the sky above them, vessels from dozens of worlds traveling freely beneath a shared peace. "I won't forget," Brandon said at last. The woman nodded. None of us should. Because the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity had given one warning, and the universe had finally listened. The galaxy never truly forgets a war. It remembers in quiet ways, scarred planets slowly healing, abandoned battlefields drifting forever in silence, and stories told to children who were not yet born when the stars burned. 50 years after the fall of the Valoran Dominion, humanity no longer felt small. It had not become an empire. It had not claimed dominance. Instead, it became something rarer. A reminder. The Galactic Assembly convened on neutral ground, a massive ring station orbiting a white dwarf star. Delegates from hundreds of species filled its chambers, beings of light and flesh, water and metal, claws and wings. Once, many of them would never have shared the same space without chains or guards. Now, they argued openly. Progress was slow, painfully slow. Old wounds did not vanish simply because a tyrant died. Some worlds still struggled with famine left behind by Dominion exploitation. Others faced civil conflicts after centuries of enforced obedience. Freedom, it turned out, required learning. Humanity helped where it could. Engineers rebuilt shattered infrastructure. Doctors trained alien medical teams. Teachers helped resurrect languages nearly erased. Not out of obligation, but because humans remembered what it meant to rebuild from ruins. Nicole Carter aged gracefully into legend. As the longest-serving ambassador in assembly history, she became known for a particular habit. Whenever negotiations stalled, whenever old hatred threatened to undo years of peace, she would tell a story. Not about victory, about fear. She spoke of the day she stood before a towering alien overseer who believed humans were insects. She described how her knees shook, how hope felt smaller than terror, and how she spoke anyway. Courage, she often said, isn't the absence of fear. It's refusing to let fear decide who you are. Ashley Morgan became an admiral in time, though she never stopped flying. Even decades later, she insisted on piloting training runs herself, pushing new recruits to their limits. When asked why she still risked it, she answered simply, "So they remember what this costs." She kept the names of her fallen squadron etched into a small metal plate inside her cockpit. She touched it before every launch. Admiral Daniel Hayes passed away quietly at the age of 87. His funeral was small by design, but across the galaxy, ships paused mid-journey. Stations dimmed their lights. Worlds observed a moment of silence for a man many had never met, but whose choices had shaped their freedom. President Marcus Webb retired shortly after the war, refusing any titles beyond citizen. He spent his remaining years teaching history at a public academy, insisting students understand not just how wars were won, but why they were fought. The most dangerous lie, he told them, is believing peace is permanent. On the centennial anniversary of the war's end, the Galactic Assembly approved a final resolution. No empire would ever be permitted to rise again. Any species attempting conquest through enslavement would face unified resistance, not later, not eventually, but immediately. The resolution passed unanimously. Even species once aligned with the Dominion voted in favor. Fear had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. It would not rule again. On Earth, in a quiet coastal town, a child stood beside the ocean, holding a worn medal. His name was Elias Cole. His grandfather had once stood beneath the same sky, staring at the stars, wondering if humanity would survive them. Elias's mother knelt beside him. "Do you know why we remember?" she asked. "So it doesn't happen again?" Elias replied. She smiled. "So we know who we are when it does." Above them, ships traced gentle arcs across the twilight sky. Exploration vessels, merchant carriers, diplomatic transports. No war formations. No weapons powered. Just movement. Life. The galaxy had changed, not because humanity was strongest or smartest, but because it refused to kneel when kneeling meant losing itself. Somewhere beyond known space, civilizations, yet untouched, would one day look toward the stars and wonder if they were alone. And if they listened carefully, if they studied history instead of ignoring it, they would hear the echo of a lesson carved into the fabric of the universe itself. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never mistake survival for surrender. And above all, never cross humanity's world